Everybody, to our session today. So today we're going to be introducing the Power BI platform. It's nice of everyone to come join us so early in the year. So what we're going to do is to have a course that has 3 different presentations. And so we're giving one today, one tomorrow, one the next day on Thursday. So today is the first course, and it's going to be an introduction to the Power BI service. Figure out what the Power BI service is, what are the tools that we use to access it, and we're going to get going with a couple fun, interesting demos. Tomorrow is where we'll look at modeling data. So that's definitely going to be a big part of mastering Power BI and not just being a Power BI Solutions consumer, but to be a Power BI Solutions author, which is definitely one of the things that a lot of you will probably be interested in. Now, on the last day, we're going to look at creating and deploying dashboards in Power BI and using things like organizational content packs to be able to create a solution in somewhat of a development environment and then push it, into an environment where all the users are using it into production. Okay, now today's agenda, in the first of our 3 different presentations for the introduction to Power BI, we're going to start by just having a general overview of what the Power BI platform is. After that, we're going to look specifically at the Power BI service and look at things like dashboards and reports and data sets and talk about fundamentally what these things are, how we create them, how they're seen by the consumer, how they're manipulated by the solutions authors. We're also going to drill down on creating data sets, reports, and dashboards. So that's going to be kind of the meat of the presentation. We'll also look at some of the sample content packs that are included along with the Power BI platform that you can basically load in and start playing around with to explore the Power BI platform. And then at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a demo. Hopefully, you'll think it's fun. I've put it together to be a fun demo. We're going to look at real-time dashboards and what we can do to create real-time dashboards. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So just a little general overview. When people talk about business intelligence or BI, they're generally talking about having some kind of mechanism that can gather data, but not just look at data, but basically distill it into information about the health of the business. And BI is not about 2 guys in a bar looking at a spreadsheet saying, why did we go out of business? It's about taking corrective actions in a timely fashion. So being able to see that your expenses are too high, they're over budget, to be able to see that 2 or 3 products are selling really well and 2 or 3 are not doing well, or finding that products are selling well in a certain geography and it's basically going to be a smart investment to start pushing more into that geography. Now, when we work on BI projects, whether we're using Power BI or some other platform, typically, our projects involve integrating data from multiple sources. One real common source is you have operational or transactional databases in SQL Server or some other type of database. We also have data in Excel workbooks and SharePoint sites. We have CSV files that we've downloaded. So being able to pull all the data in to create a data set, but also performing transforms, so cleaning up data, also being able to transform data into more meaningful information and creating calculations. Now, we want to be able to create large data sets, and we want to be able to have the consumers run queries or look at visuals that are running queries behind the scenes, and we want a very rapid response. And finally, we want to create reports and visualizations. Now, I'm going to go through this next slide pretty quickly, even though it's got a lot on it. What I wanted to do is quickly paint a picture of the last 30 years that Microsoft has been contributing towards business intelligence, creating different tools. So back in 1985, we first had Microsoft Excel. Obviously, that's a tool that many business analysts use, and it's the most used tool for doing business analytics. Now, we also have a series of SQL Server products. SQL Server being the main database that we use for operational and transactional databases. We also have things like SQL reporting services that allow us to create reports on what's in SQL, SQL integration services, that allows us to do a very complicated way to set up a data warehouse and to pull data from all these transactional sources into that. Now, what we started seeing about 2007, when the introduction of SharePoint 2007, was we had a visualization aspect pop up inside of SharePoint with Excel services. Microsoft also purchased a company called ProClarity and changed their engine for doing BI visualizations on multi-dimensional databases and cubes into basically a dashboard designer. Okay, now one thing that really changed things is in 2008, after for the first 8 years we relied on multi-dimensional databases and basically multi-dimensional cubes, Microsoft introduced a new model, which is the tabular model, which is an alternative to the multi-dimensional model, and in some ways it's much simpler and leads to much faster projects as far as the time to complete projects. Now, once the tabular model got created, we have support in SQL Server analysis services. They also added support into Excel as early as 2010 with a Power Pivot add-on. Also, a Power Pivot add-on was created for Excel 2010. Now, the third thing is that Microsoft created a tool which is called Power View. And we had both Power View inside of SharePoint, and then in 2013 we had Power View inside of Excel. Now, we're going to see that some of these products are going to make it over the hump, some are not. Now, Microsoft also added Power Query. Power Query is a tool that I can use. It's kind of an end-user focused tool, not a developer-focused tool like SQL Server integration services, and it allows us to pull data from multiple sources and do powerful transforms using a fairly easy-to-use engine. Now, when it comes to Power BI, Microsoft had a first generation. Now, if you play golf, you probably know the term mulligan. You have a shot, it's horrible, and someone you're playing with gives you another shot. If you don't play golf, maybe you could follow the first pancake principle. Whenever you're cooking pancakes and the pan's not quite hot enough, the first pancake never really works out, so the second pancake's always better. If you're a firstborn child, forget everything I just said. But the idea that Microsoft came out with Power BI for Office version 1, and about a year later they basically scrapped that and built it from the ground up. Kind of the short story is that Power BI for Office had a lot of dependencies that Microsoft started regretting as they went through the beta cycle, and in particular dependencies on SharePoint and SharePoint sites. So Microsoft then shipped Power BI, what we call Power BI version 2, some people call it the new experience, and that's what shipped in beta about a year ago, and that's what we've been using. That's what we're going forward with. There's also Power BI Desktop. That's a tool that I'm going to use a lot tomorrow, and we're going to see that's going to be a modeling tool for business users. Now, going forward, we also have Excel 2016. We have Excel Online in Office 365. Note that it's no longer called Excel Services, but all the server-side web-based Office products are now Excel Online, Word Online. And what we'll also see moving forward is that a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today that only work in the cloud are going to start working on-premise with SQL Server 2016 and specifically with SQL Server Reporting Services 2016. Now, let's quickly go through, of all those products we just looked at, which ones does Microsoft like? Which ones will Microsoft be investing in and making better and better? So definitely Microsoft Excel, SQL Server and analysis services, integration services, and reporting services. Tabular databases are definitely a big focus of Microsoft's investment. Now, they have PR statements saying multi-dimensional databases are not dead. Well, they've worked on those for a while. They're very powerful. So without Microsoft investing more and just kind of keeping them where they are, they're still going to be, a useful thing when you have a BI project that requires the complication that can only be tackled by a multi-dimensional database. But what we'll see is that tabular databases are getting a much greater investment, and all the new tools are being built around them. And when I say tabular databases, that means Power Pivot, because basically it's a modeling tool built on top of the tabular databases, and the data analysis expression language, or DAX, which is also built on tabular databases. Now, Power Query also seems to be gaining a lot of momentum, and Microsoft will continue to invest in that. The Power BI service that we're going to look at, forget about version 1, it's version 2, that's the one you care about, and Microsoft will continue to erase things, trying to make it as if Power BI version 1 never existed. Okay, and then also the Power BI desktop. I won't look at that tool at all today, but that will be the focus of our presentation tomorrow. Excel Online is also going to be strategic, no longer considered part of SharePoint, and then also, as I mentioned, SQL Server 2016 is taking so many of the things that now only work in the cloud and giving us the ability to kind of use the same technology foundation in on-premise scenarios as far as hosting our report server on premises. Now, what technologies might we have used that Microsoft really is not investing in moving forward? So definitely Power BI for Office 365, but also Power View. Lots of us had used Power View both in SharePoint and in Excel 2013. The problem with Power View is it took a big dependency on Silverlight that could not be overcome, and Microsoft has a new focus on mobile devices, specifically iPhones and Androids, and the Power View story just was not a good fit. So what you'll see is that while Microsoft is not removing Power View from the next version of Excel, it certainly is not investing more to make it better, and I think you can also argue that they've taken its entry point in the UI and made it harder to find so less people kind of discover it and start using it. Performance point services is another thing that if you have been working on premises and you're working with multidimensional databases, it's a great fit in SharePoint 2010, in SharePoint 2013, maybe even in SharePoint 2016. But two problems with Performance Point. One, just like Power View, it has a Silverlight foundation that just makes it unusable with mobile devices. And secondly, it was built for the multidimensional model, not the tabular model. So for various reasons, Microsoft is just no longer going to invest in Performance Point services, nor will we ever see a version of that up in the cloud. Okay, Excel services in SharePoint Server. Note that as you move to SharePoint 2016, Excel services is no longer there. Excel as a web-based environment has been moved out into Excel Online, separate product. And I think in general you'll see that as Microsoft moves forward, where in 2007, 2010, and 2013, SharePoint was a blessed place for Microsoft to start surfacing BI reports and dashboards, and they've done an about face. So SharePoint is no longer the special place to service dashboards and reports. That being said, in Power BI, I can have a dashboard tile, and I can put it on any type of website, including SharePoint. But then SharePoint just acts as another website. It's not going to be special in that respect. Okay, so now, what will be the replacement for Performance Point services? Well, I would think that what we're going to look at here, the Power BI service, and the way that we create reports and dashboards is what Microsoft, is saying will be the replacement for that. Okay, so what is Power BI? Well, in some ways, Power BI is one of those terms that Microsoft comes up with as a foundational marketing term, and then lots of people jump on. People were saying, hey, I'm using Power Query in Excel 2013. I'm using Power BI. I would say that, sure, you can kind of say that. No one can prove you're wrong. But I think more specifically, Power BI is a collection of online services and features. And it's an environment that Microsoft continually invests in to promote the idea of self-service BI. And not just self-service BI, but self-service BI to the point where every end user, if you can use Excel, you should be able to get into Power BI, create a data set, create a report, and create a dashboard. So they're trying to make this a platform that's not for developers and not for highly technical users, but something that anyone can use. Okay, now what we'll also see is that if you have invested in getting up to speed on Power Query and Power Pivot, you're in a great place because those two tools are central to Power BI and its move to empower the end user. Now, Power BI is something that's going to allow us to import data, to analyze that data, and to create reports and dashboards that visualize that data. Now, specifically, the Power BI service is something that's accessible to subscribe users. So if you have an Office 365 account, you need a Power BI license. The general Power BI license is free. I'm not sure how long it's going to be free for, but they have a Power BI Pro, which is $10 a month. So Microsoft is certainly making the price very attractive, being free, for people to get in and start trying this. Now, once you log on to the Power BI service, which is going to be at app.powerbi.com, you're going to have access to your personal workspace. And you possibly could have access to group workspaces. Now, workspaces are going to contain the building blocks of a Power BI solution, which involve datasets, reports, and dashboards. Okay. Also, we're going to see the Power BI service supports Power Query features, as well as Power Pivot and DAX features used for data modeling. Now, Power BI service, while you won't be able to model data inside, once you have a data set, you're going to be able to create reports and dashboards, and we're going to see a lot of those in the demos I do today. Now let's look specifically at this idea of a Power BI workspace. Now if I take a quick tangent and I go back to the version 1 of Power BI that Microsoft is kind of pulling the plug on, what you had to do is you had to go and enter a SharePoint site, and everything you did was in the context of a SharePoint site. Microsoft decided that we don't want a dependency on SharePoint because then anyone who wants to use Power BI has to have a SharePoint license. So what they did is they re-architected things. Instead of having the SharePoint site be the context for the user, they use something which is called a workspace. So when you log on to the Power BI service, you will always running in the scope of a specific workspace. Now, you'll always get a personal workspace, which they call My Workspace. Now, there's also group workspaces. So with a group workspace, what I can do is I can create some dashboards and reports, and then lots of people can come and see those inside the group workspace. Also, if you want team authoring, I want me and 2 other people to all be working on the Power Query reports or the Power Query data import and the data modeling and the reports. If we create a group workspace, you can have more than one person with authoring rights inside there. Now, one little note, you're going to be able to create a new group workspace through the Power BI service. But when you do that, what's important to note is in the background, Power BI is creating a unified group in Office 365. So if you've never heard of unified groups were introduced over the last year into Office 365 to deal with some of the disparity between groups that we have in Azure Active Directory and groups that we have in Exchange and SharePoint. If you create a Office 365 unified group, it gets an email address. It can be used basically to configure security. So I can basically go to a file share and give permission to this Office 365 unified group. I can then add members to the group. Anyone who's a member can go in there. But we also get things like conversations. There is a team site. So when you create a unified group, it also has a OneDrive, just like individual users in Office 365 have OneDrives. So once you understand the unified group and what you get, it makes a lot of sense that they're creating a new unified group every time you create a new Power BI group workspace. Now, specifically, a workspace is a container, and it has 3 types of things. It's going to have dashboards, and generally, if you're a consumer, the dashboard is your entry point. You go, you look at one of your dashboards, and you go look at the visualizations that are being shown to you. Now, if you need more detail, you can drill down into reports that live behind the dashboards. And then ultimately, there are data sets. Now, if you are a consumer, generally, you look at dashboards and you might drill into a report, and you might not really care so much about the data sets. If you are a BI solutions author, you kind of work from the bottom up, not from the top down. So the idea is you create data sets, you then build reports, and then you create dashboards as the last step. Now, just to, one more time, go over what we just talked about. The 4 basic concepts. The first one is the workspace. Provides user context. You're probably going to start in your personal workspace, but the more that you want a team of people either authoring or a large team being able to view what you have as far as your dashboards and reports, you might want to create group workspaces. We have dashboards. So dashboards provide consolidated views into reports and the underlying data sets. And they provide an entry point. And what's really important is that the dashboards have really been honed in to support mobile devices. So you might have big reports, you might have data sets that are hard to see, but the idea is when a consumer in his or her iPhone installs the Power BI app, and then they basically log in, it's going to say, here are your workspaces. Which one do you want to go to? I want to go to this. Here are your dashboards. So it just gives a very easy entry point, and then the way that dashboards are presented, are very pure HTML5 and are made just to basically work across, the wide array of tablets and mobile devices that we're working with these days. We have reports. As we'll see, reports are going to be collections of pages that contain visuals. And once you create a visual in a report, you have the option to pin it to a new dashboard or an existing dashboard. And finally, we have data sets. Now, the data set is going to be an important thing. The data set is something that can be very simple. Could be a table with 10 rows inside of it. It could be a data model that you created with Excel using Power Pivot or the Power BI desktop, and it might have 20 different tables and lots of calculated columns and measures inside. So once again, it can be very complicated or very simple depending on what the underlying data set is. Now, what are the tools? Well, today we're just going to look at the Power BI service using a standard web browser. And so some of the things I'm going to show you how to do is how to import data sets, how we can design reports and dashboards. On Thursday, on day 3, I'll also talk about creating content packs. So the idea is in your personal workspace, you can create a data set, you can create reports, you can create a dashboard, and then you can create a content pack to be able to deploy your solution out into other workspaces inside there. Okay, now note that nothing in the browser, nothing we're going to do today is going to allow you to really model the data, to create things like DAX expressions, measures, or calculated columns. Now tomorrow, we're going to look at Power BI Desktop. So once again, it wasn't just that Microsoft wanted to remove SharePoint dependencies from the Power BI story. They also made a big decision in Power BI version 2 to remove Office dependencies and specifically dependencies on Excel. So while Microsoft still positions Excel 2016 as the high-end tool for data analysts, you can just use this free one-click desktop application, Power BI Desktop, and you can do all the modeling that you need for a Power BI solution, and you never need to involve Excel 2016. So tomorrow, what we'll see is Power BI Desktop can be used to create data sets by importing and transforming data with Power Query. Once you've got the data into the data set, you can continue to model it using Power Pivot and DAX. Once your data set is complete, you can start building your reports. Okay, now currently Power BI Desktop does not support creating dashboards, and we'll see that on Thursday. The last thing we have is Microsoft Excel 2016. Power BI and Excel can work together. Each of them can live fully complete BI lives without the other. But still, there'll be reasons. Maybe you want to do your data modeling in Excel and upload a Excel workbook file with a data model like I'm going to demo today. Okay, one more thing. A couple questions here. Will Power BI 2.0 be available on-premise SharePoint environment? And I would say that SharePoint will not involve any Power BI stuff in 2016. So it's really the SQL Server reporting services in 2016 that's going to give us a on-premise server to host our reports in. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, now I'm not going to go through much of this slide right here, but note that what gets to be helpful if you're doing work with Power BI, rather than just configuring a license for yourself for Power BI in the Office 365 tenant that your company has, you can go off, sign up for a trial tenant, and when you do that, what's really nice is that you can start creating extra accounts because you'll need your privileged account to do the authoring, but then you'll want to log in as a second account so you can see what a less privileged user sees when they look at your dashboards. So if you take one of our courses, it's the first thing you do on day one is have you create a Power BI test environment. Okay, now let's look more specifically at things in the Power BI service. Now in the Power BI service, what we're going to have is a browser-based experience that we can see things that are inside there, and you're always going to be logged in as a specific workspace. Now, the Power BI service, its web application has a navigation pane, and the navigation pane shows you the list of dashboards, reports, and data sets that you can see. Also note that if you drop down where it says My Workspace, you can create additional workspaces just through the UI, and it does all the work to create the unified group in Office 365 behind the scenes. Okay, now dashboards are things that contain these visual elements that we call tiles. And what we're going to do is typically create a report, create a visual on the report, and then pin that as a tile to a dashboard. One thing you're going to see in the last demo, one big difference between dashboards and reports is that dashboards, if you have a real-time dashboard, automatically updates as new data is entered, where reports have to be refreshed. You'll also see that the layout for a dashboard is a little bit more restrictive in the fact that it makes every single element be a certain width and height because it's adapting to a grid for a responsive design to target mobile devices like iPhones, Androids, and iPads. Now, one nice thing about working with a dashboard as a consumer is that if you look at a dashboard, you see a couple tiles. You can click on a tile, and if that tile was pinned from a report, you automatically navigate to that report. Okay. Also, what you'll see with reports is a report contains at least one page, but can contain as many pages as you'd like to put in there. And at the very bottom of the report page is a tabbed navigation control, so you can move from page to page. Now, one of the things that we're going to be interested in this next demo is report authoring. If you look at a report, generally you start in reading view. If you click on edit view, all of a sudden you have editing capabilities, and you can start adding visualizations to the report, and you can start modifying their properties. Now, when we create reports, we have these things that are called visuals. Now, a funny story is if you look about a year and a half ago, people on the Power BI team always call these things visualizations. And you look through documentation, and you'll see that something like 10% of the word count was just letters in the word visualization. And over the last year, they became tired of typing it out, I think. But now they're calling them visuals as much or more often than visualizations. So visual and visualization mean the same thing. Just matters if you want to add the extra couple syllables at the end. But the idea is we have a visualizations pane that we can use to either add a visualization to a report, or we can change an existing visualization from one visualization type to another. Okay, and also we'll see that when it's time to create visuals and modify visuals, we have a fields list over on the right-hand side of the page. Now, when we work with visuals and you select a visual, there's going to be something like a property sheet over in the right-hand task pane just under the visualization list. And you'll see that there are field properties that generally give us the ability to change what fields are being used by the visual. And then there's format properties. And the idea of format properties is adding a title, removing a title, changing font size, changing colors, things like that. Okay. Now, when you look at a fields list, the fields list is going to have as many tables as the underlying data set has. So remember, the data set and the report have a one-to-one correlation. Whenever you're in a report, that report is based on a specific data set, and that data set has one table or 5 tables, and the idea is that you'll have tables and then you'll have fields lists inside there. Okay, now one last thing is, if you read that last bullet point, report author sees tables and fields as a data set consumer. So today, we're not doing any data modeling. That's what we're going to do tomorrow. So today, we really see the data set from the consumer, not the author's perception. Okay, well, without any more ado, let's kind of get in and do some things. Now, I'm going to use some sample data. There is this one particular place that you might want to go look at, because this is where the data is coming from right here. There is a GitHub repository. I think we've already sent you an email with an easier way to download the zip file. But what you'll see here is I have things like the Excel spreadsheet I'm going to use. If you look under SQL Server, there's a file that you can use to restore the database that I'm going to use tomorrow to pull data from to do the data modeling. So this is just all the sample data that we use for our classes and for our demos. So I've already downloaded that. Notice that if you go to this one link right here, if you've never used GitHub before, this is a repository, and they have this download zip. So if you click on download zip, you can basically have it bring back this entire zip file for you, and now you can take it, put it on your machine. Okay, now what we're going to do is to get started with the Power BI service. Now, if you have Power BI license already there, you should see it from the app launcher. And what's going to happen is you're going to launch there, and let's go ahead and go to our particular service right here. And what happens is we get to this particular page, and it sees that I'm in my workspace. Note here that I could create a new group workspace. I could move to one of the other group workspaces. I'm just going to stay in my personal workspace. I have no dashboards, reports, or data sets, and so they show me this get data. Okay, now before I get data, let's go back to my OneDrive for Business. And the reason that I want to do this, let's go ahead and open this up right here and say Files, is that Microsoft has made it so that there is a very smooth path when you decide that you'd like to import data from your OneDrive for Business or your OneDrive personal site inside there. So I'm going to upload that. I'm going to upload one other thing inside there. Let me go ahead and upload this particular file. Okay, so now that we've got a couple files in OneDrive, let's go ahead and move back to Power BI. And back in Power BI, let's say I want to import a simple CSV file. So I'm going to say import. And now it's going to take me to my OneDrive for Business. Another thing, it's not just easy to import, but also the refresh. Office or Power BI has a much easier time of refreshing things when it knows where they are. And if you point to a path in your OneDrive site, that's going to be easy. So I'm going to take this CSV file. We're going to choose Connect. After choosing Connect, it's going to import that CSV file right here. Now note that when they import a data set, whether you want it or not, they create a dashboard. I don't really want a dashboard. I just want to play around with this, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the dashboard. And now, if I look at the data set and double-click on it, I can't do any data set modeling here. So what they do is they show me a blank report. And so the idea is that now I can do something such as, well, let's add a table visual into the report right here. Now let's take the product title. Let's take the product category inside here. Let's take the product unit cost inside. And now that we have these things inside, well, it's a simple little list of a table. If I wanted to do something else, maybe I wanted to see how many things were in each product category, I could now bring this up. I'll bring the product ID inside here. I could go ahead and count distinct unit cost, and unit cost, let's go ahead and take an average. Okay, so once again, if you have simple data, you can't really do any more modeling, but as long as you can find ways to visualize that data, you're good to go. Okay, and let's take this wingtip products, and now that I've created this report, I'll do a save as, and we'll just save this one as wingtip products as well. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's import a second data set. So I'm going to go down to the bottom. We'll click on Get Data, and then we'll go ahead and use Files. Okay, so now this time we're going to import something different. So this is an Excel workbook, but it has a data model that I've built into it. Now, a lot of the work that I've done to this data model involves using Power Query and involves using Power Pivot and DAX. So we're not going to show all that type of stuff till tomorrow, but let's kind of see the result. So let's not get involved with modeling the data. We're just consumers of a data set that someone's worked on. So now we go ahead and look at this, and all of a sudden we see a much better presentation, because now I have something at the top, sales. If you work in the BI world, if you create a table and you hide all the regular columns and only show measures, they put it up at the top and they kind of promote it to what BI people call a fact table. So let's say that I wanted to see something such as a report here, and for our particular report we want to look at sales revenue. And also we have a timetable, a calendar table. Maybe we want to look at things by month inside here. Okay, now things are starting to look good. Once again, I'm working in the fields pane, we're working on field properties right here. Maybe one more thing that we'll do is we look at things over time. Maybe we want to see how this revenue splits up by something such as sales region. I could bring that and take a look at that inside there. Another neat thing is I can copy and paste, and if I copy and paste right here, I basically duplicated that, and now instead of looking at sales regions inside here, maybe for this second one, we'll go look at product, and we'll look at product category and see how things work out there. Okay, so now you've seen that. You have kind of a basic understanding how we create reports. Let's go ahead and do a save as. And so for this one, we'll call this wingtip sales analysis. And once I save this particular report, and I now click on the pin up there, I can basically add this to a new dashboard, and we'll give that dashboard a name. Now, I'm going to delete the dashboard that was automatically added, but that's my dashboard right here. Now, note that when you work with dashboards, there's not a one-to-one correspondence for an underlying report or data set. I could go to a second report from a second data set, add things inside there as well. There's also ways that you can look for, customers or sales, revenue by state. So they have a natural language query feature that is going to be able to look at your data, and let's see if this works. Takes a few minutes to look at the data. Probably shouldn't have done that because it does a initial set of analysis on the underlying data, so that's going to take a minute or two. But just this whole idea of the dashboard. Also note that when you move the dashboard around, if I let go of it here, watch it snap out. If I want to make this really small, and that's because it fits to a grid section, unlike reports, because they want to ensure that these things look really good on dashboard devices. Okay, let's go through a couple more slides. So what I wanted to show you there is basically just how to get started. And the idea is if you take data and you upload it to OneDrive, it's going to give you an easier path to bring it in. Okay, we looked at designing reports, and as we were designing the reports, what we saw is that the pages contain various visualizations. I'm holding back. The last demo, I'm going to do a lot more with reports and dashboards, but I just wanted to give you a taste in that first demo. And the idea is that you create visuals, and they display fields from the underlying data inside there. Okay, and then also the whole idea of going to a visual, finding that little pin, clicking it, taking it, and then either pinning it to a new dashboard or an existing dashboard, and then repositioning the dashboard is what's important. Now, also note, if you just want to play around, there are a lot of samples that you can use. For instance, if I go back here and I choose Get Data, and now there is a samples link right here. If I click on samples, here's a whole bunch of content packs that Microsoft has added so you can play around with. And for instance, if I take one of these content packs, what's going to happen is it's going to automatically add a data set that has plenty of modeling, and also they are going to give me not just the data set, but a report and a dashboard inside here. Okay, once again, what they're trying to do is kind of show you some completed solutions and show you kind of the benefit of pushing something out. Now, another thing is if you added these in and you want to get rid of them, you can just come up and remove them. I just added in that one content pack and it added in a dashboard and a report and a data set. If I don't want them, I'll just basically remove them. Okay, well that takes us to the last section that we have here. So what I wanted to do is give you an idea of the power of real-time dashboards in Power BI. So we need a little scenario. And while this scenario is entirely fictitious, it's made up, hopefully it will kind of drive home what the point is. So with our scenario, we start in the United States, and we're going to head down to where I live into the state of Florida, and then a little further down to the Tampa-St. Pete area. Now, if we keep drilling down, there is this one particular town which is called Lutz. And Lutz is important because it's the home of many alpaca farms. We have tons of alpacas, we have alpaca breeding, and there's our buddy Luther Ray who's feeding the alpaca right there. Note that Luther Ray not only is one of the leading alpaca farmers, he's also the main IT guy for the industry. Now, there's this one particular fellow who's an alpaca farmer named Joseph Patrick McMurphy, who we call Alpaca Joe. Now, Alpaca Joe has a very impressive background. He's the only one who was a Navy SEAL who graduated from the Juilliard School of Music. He has a degree from 17 different universities. Very amazing guy. He really got ticked off the other day because for some reason Donald Trump was working through a field, saw some alpacas, and made some remarks. Security, get these foul, hideous beasts the hell out of here. These things are disgusting, truly disgusting. Well, Alpaca Joe was pretty offended by that. This alpaca hate speech is getting out of control. Alpacas are some of the finest animals that inhabit the earth. I call upon Donald Trump to issue an apology. So now we have Donald Trump on the campaign trail, and some of the industry's most reputable newscasters started asking questions. Mr. Trump, you've made some remarks about alpacas in a manner that the vast majority of the U.S. population finds very offensive. Many on the far left are calling for an apology. How do you respond? And as you would imagine, he just comes back with doubling down on talking about alpacas. Proud to say no alpaca has ever been admitted to Wharton Business School. If I were a teacher, I'd give every alpaca a report card of straight D's, and D stands for dishonest, despicable, desperate, drama queens, and despondent. And as you can imagine, things heat up on Twitter. And so going back and forth between Alpaca Joe and Donald Trump. So finally, what is Alpaca Joe's thinking? I should run for president. well, I kind of know what politics is like. Do I really want to get in that arena? And he decides, yes, he does. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stand up a website and we're going to run a simulation of a Power BI dashboard for campaign contributions. Okay, now, once again, let me go back here, and I have a little campaign contributions demo. Now, the secret of how this works is Power BI has a developer platform built into it. And one of the things that we can do is we can write HTTP requests to basically start creating data sets and adding rows. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start this simulation. And it's going to create a new campaign contributions data set, and it's going to keep adding new contributions in there over time. So let's go ahead and start this right here. So I go ahead, I start this right here. We'll kind of keep the workspace up here, kind of see how things are moving inside. And what we can see now is there's the campaign contributions workspace it's got. Connecting to Power BI Workspace, system is now operational, and now we're ready to start accepting contributions. Well, that's great. So now let's go to this new campaign contributions data set. And when I click on this, I have a new report. So what I want to do is I want to create a contributions summary page inside here. So we'll create a contribution summary page, and maybe first we'll just add a table inside here. And as I add a table, I'll look at my contributors, and we'll go ahead and add a contributor and what city the contributor is from. Hey, that looks great. Maybe the amount that the contributor has inside there. Okay. Now notice that because I'm in a report, I have to click on refresh to basically see new things. Oh, I just hit refresh, and there, there's our fifth thing inside there. Let's also go ahead and do a save as. And so we have our campaign contributions that we're going to have inside here. Great. Okay, now I've got this report. Let's go ahead and add some more things here. There's this one particular visual, which is the card. If I want to just show something simple. So I'm going to go ahead and take the amount and add that to the fields, and that's going to show me what we've got so far in campaign contributions. Let's go ahead, we'll add that over here. Let's go modify a couple properties. So in particular, let's tell it not to put on things, and also if I take the category label, turn it off. And now let's go ahead and turn on the title right here. So this is going to be a total of contributions. Okay, so I've got that. Let's add one more thing inside here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to copy this and paste it so I don't have to redo the properties. But now let's go back to field properties here. And I have another table. I've got some values, and our goal that we have, actually let me do that one more time. We'll go ahead, and the campaign goal is going to be $1 million. Okay, so that's what we want to get to, is $1 million by the time we get to the end. Quickly, we'll go up here and we'll turn off the category labels, and we'll turn on the title, and we'll put the contribution goal inside here. Okay, now that I've got this, one of the things that we're going to be able to see kind of immediately here is the big difference between reports and dashboards. So let's go ahead, save my work. Now we'll go ahead and we'll pin this, and we want to pin it to a new dashboard. And I'll just call this one contributions. Now when we get here, what we're going to see is that these things are going to be changing in real time. And then we'll go back here. Let's go ahead and add this one as well. Go ahead, add that to the contributions dashboard. Now, while we're here, let's go back into edit mode. Let's add one more thing. There's this special visualization type, which is known as a gauge. So with the particular gauge, I'd like this to kind of show us how close we are to our $1 million. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll take the amount and the sum of amount for the value, And then also, we're going to put our goal as the target value. And then also, it always puts you to 50% if you don't put a maximum value. So I also have a maximum value that I want to add inside here just to make this look a little bit better. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's save our work right here. Let's go ahead and pin that and pin that to the existing dashboard. Now let's go look at our dashboard. And once again, things are looking good inside there. Maybe I'll change things around a little bit. Put that up here. Put that back there. Okay, a couple more things that I want to do here. One is, let's go back and, gosh, now I have so many contributors that we can't show them all at once anymore. So I'm going to go back into Edit Report. I'm going to delete this visualization, and we're going to add one more visualization. And so for this visualization, what I'd like to see is how we're getting contributions over time. So in this case right here, we're going to take the amount, and that's going to be the value. And then also, we have a time field inside here. And so the idea of this particular time field is that I can kind of show every 30 seconds how much we've made inside here. Let's go ahead and pin that inside. Go back, look at the contributions dashboard. And now we're going to see, oh, now I see something really strange. Now that I've added that, it looks like we've flattened out. We were doing great. Let me go back and take a look at our program. What's that? Oh no, the website's having problems. Website visitor experience errors. Oh my gosh, now they're getting Luther Ray, the IT guy, on it to basically go back and do some work inside there. Oh, it looks like we're down. So at this point, we're getting Luther Ray out of the Alpaca field. And so what he needs to do is he needs to basically go back and get things online again. Okay, looks like he's done that. He's got the site started back up again. And finally now, okay, we can kind of see that, our lifeline right here. Let's go ahead and, as you're working with dashboards, every tile has both a title and a subtitle. And so let's call this, the Alpaca meter inside there, and the pulse of Alpaca freedom. Okay, let's see. Okay, didn't do that as well as I should have. Anyway, let's go back to our report. Now that we've kind of got this basic sense inside there. So now what we're going to do is we'll go back to campaign contributions, and I'm going to go back to report mode, and let's go ahead and create a second page. And this is going to be for contributions by city. So what we'd like to see here is, first of all, let's put a simple table out there. And so we'd like to see the particular city. And then after the city, we want to see the amount inside here. And once we've got that in place, note that the sum is not going to, or the amount is not summed unless we ask it to be summed. Okay, and then also, let's go ahead and add the sorting. So we have the cities with the largest up top. Okay, now let's do something similar to that, except now we're going to add a map. We'll add a map, and with our particular map, we're going to take city, add that as the location. We'll take amount, and we'll add that as values. The green on this background isn't showing up all that well, so let's go back to data colors and find a better color here. Let's see, since we're going after Donald Trump, let's go ahead and make it bright red just to kind of reflect his hair. Let's also go and do things like turn off the title inside there. Okay, so once again, let's go ahead and save. And now let's go ahead and pin both of these to our dashboard as well. So now we'll pin that to contributions. We will go ahead and we'll pin this to contributions. We'll go back to our contributions dashboard. Okay, now as things are running along here, inside of our dashboard, we might decide we want to make things smaller, we might want to make things bigger. Note that it's not showing everything. So let me make my screen a little bigger right here, and maybe kind of position things so that we can show all the things that we want to show at the same time. Okay, so now that we've got those things inside here, another thing that we can show here is that there is this bar up top, and sometimes I want people to issue natural language queries. Other times I don't. So by going to our dashboard, going to settings, and saying remove, and now we're back here. And so now we got to the point where the dashboard simulation has gone through. We hit $1 million. We've kind of seen the pulse of how things work. We've seen these inside. And if I want to just do a little bit more work on the backside with analysis, we could go back to our report. Maybe we'll go back into report editing mode. We'll add one more page. And so this one will be looking at the contributors themselves. And so in this case right here, what I'd like to do is look at specific contributors. So let's kind of start by adding a table. Once we have a table inside here, we're going to go ahead and take the contributor name, add that. After the contributor name, we'll go ahead and add the city of the contributor. And then we'll have the contributor value. And once again, let's go ahead and sort. So the highest contributions come up to the top. Now, there's way too many to see. So now what we'd like to do is we'd like to add in what's called a slicer. I'm going to add in a particular slicer right here. And with the slicer, let's go ahead and add city. And so now that I have a city slicer, I can add cities, and now we can just see individuals. And then one last thing I'll do is I'll go back to this one particular visual, and I'll add a filter. And so let's only show them when the amount that they gave is either equal to or greater than $1,000. Okay, and once again now we have this particular visual inside here. And maybe as a last thing that I'll do, just to show one more thing about using these filters, is let me turn off the filter. We can see everything inside there. Let's now add one more card, and that card, we want to show a count of contributors. So we'll go ahead and we'll add the contributor, and we'll have a distinct count of contributor inside there. Okay, so now that we have this distinct count of contributor, watch what happens when I start clicking on cities. Notice that it's just telling me the city-specific count of contributor. So let's say that I want this count of contributors to always show the total amount, but I want only this visual to take the filtering effect of the slicer. So first of all, I click on the slicer. Up here, we have visual interactions. Well, I click on visual interaction, and it shows me that for this one, I can either use the filter or click none. Here, it's set to use the filter, so I'll leave that in place. But what you've seen here is that now you can filter just selected items on that page inside. Okay, so that concludes our demo inside there. So what you see with real-time dashboards is that they give you some pretty phenomenal capabilities. Now, a couple notes. One, my demo is calling right into the Power BI service, which takes some data velocity, but not a lot of data velocity. You can basically do about a request per second. And so in my demo, I'm at the end pushing in about 100 different rows per second. If you have things that have lots of velocity, when you're talking about hundreds or thousands of entries per second, the architecture you have to change to is to use an Azure piece, which is called the Azure Analytics Streaming Service, and that will give you a front end that can take thousands or tens of thousands of requests per second and then stream it in so you can get the exact same effect on your dashboard inside there. Okay, next steps. What should you do after these 3 days? Get a Power BI license, play around with the Party BI pack, and then also we have a fundamental Power BI training course, which is called Data Analytics and Reporting with Power BI and Office 365. It's instructor-led training with me, and we'll give you a ton of hands-on lab exercises. Note that the courseware has to be updated monthly because things like the Power BI desktop is changing. We have a new release each month, and we're getting new features. And note that you can either attend this course in person or attend it remotely from wherever you are. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go through a couple of the questions that I see here in the queue. If you want to ask more questions, please go ahead and add them to the text answer question. Okay, is there any auto sizing or auto alignment? Good question, Tony. If I go back here, what you're going to see is that when you are on a dashboard, absolutely. And you have to, it's kind of forced on you. You get this resizing requirements inside there. And you're not going to have the same type of thing, as you're working with reports. So when you go back to reports and you're kind of moving things around, you're going to find that back in edit mode right here, you're not going to find the type of things that you want. That could be a feature that gets added in over time. One of the things that's really interesting about the new world which we find ourselves in is that things change at a very fast pace, and many of us are kind of used to Office 2013 or SharePoint 2013 shipping and being fairly static for the next 3 years, and now things are very, very different. So there's some obvious things that they need to improve in Power BI Desktop, but they come out and just say, that's on our list, it's just not a high enough priority to get attention this month. So once again, you might see some of those in the future. Okay, for Dina, I'm sorry that my political scheme seemed to take away focus from that. I apologize for those. I try to keep it fun and light and give us a motivation for creating the dashboard inside there. I don't see any more questions. So any other comments? No? But other than that, that is all the content that we have for this day 1 hour's worth. So we'll meet you back tomorrow, and we'll look at data modeling, in particular working with the Power BI desktop query features and the Power Pivot features. Thanks very much for attending.